Hello everyone and welcome to Life Begins at 20. My name is Mark and today I have the brand new Commander 2016 deck Invent Superiority opening for you. This is one of the 5 new decks with each having a 4-colour commander. Breya Etherium Shaper is the commander for this deck with the colours white, blue, black and red. The partner mechanic is something new to Commander 2016, where you can have 2 commanders if they both have partner. The combination of their colour identity determines which colours you can utilise in your deck. If you decide to do this, the 2 cards start in the command zone, and the commander tax, if they get removed, is only applied to each individual card rather than together. This would then cause the remaining deck to be 98 cards. Each commander box contains the following: a 100 card commander deck, which includes 4 foil commanders, foil oversized card of your commander, 10 double-sided tokens, a deck storage box, a deck strategy insert which talks about what cards are in the deck and strategies for it, and a magic quick reference guide. So let's open up the deck and see what we've got inside. The full link in the description will be for the full deck list. You'll be able to read it either there or a link to Wizards of the Coast to be able to see all the cards in this deck and what they are available to do. So first up we've got Breya Etherium Shaper. So this is your main commander. So when Breya enters the battlefield, it creates 2 blue Thopters with flying. You can then pay 2 to sacrifice 2 artifacts. These could be these Thopters or any other artifacts you have in this deck. You get to choose one, either deals 3 damage to target player, target creature gets -4/-4 until the end of turn, or you gain 5 life. To be perfectly honest, the first 2 are the ones that are going to be used more often than not. The 5 life is nice if you've got extra artifacts, but I highly doubt it'll end up being used. I do like this commander in this deck because it utilises so many ways of either enter the battlefield triggers for artifacts or even just entering the graveyard triggers as well. So really good commander there. I really do like this deck from this. Next to the legendaries we've got Akiri Line-Slinger. So it's a 2 cost 0/3 with first strike and vigilance, and it gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control with a partner mechanic. With the amount of artifacts in this deck, this will be a really good defensive blocker or even attacker, because you could end up having 7-8 artifacts out, and with first strike it's going to deal so much damage. Really like this card. Next we've got Brustal, the Boorish Herder. So for 2, a red and a white, he enters the battlefield, is a 3/3, and when he enters the battlefield, target creature you control gains double strike and lifelink. That side of things is really nice, and when he attacks it gets the same thing as well. But considering it's a combo deck with lots of artifacts, it seems a little out of place, but he is a pretty cool card. And the last of the 4 legendaries we've got is Silas Renn, Seeker Adept. So for 1, a blue and a black, you get a 2/2 artifact creature human with Death Touch, and whenever he deals combat damage to a player, choose target artifact from your graveyard and you may cast it this turn. If you can get him to swing in, this is a great card. I mean, the deck is pretty built around putting artifacts in the graveyard and taking them back out of the graveyard. So if you can get him to deal damage, fantastic. People might be hesitant to block him just because of Death Touch, unless they've got a cheap creature to do so. So I do like him, possibly a little weak, but getting the artifacts back is great. And then we've got the double-sided tokens here, which I really do like them being double-sided, just takes up far less space. So again, this is another one of the cards like Myr Retriever here, where whenever it dies you can return another artifact crit card from your graveyard to your hand. Perfect sacrifice outlet if you need to. Vedalken Engineer, so you've got yourself a bit of mana ramp for artifact spells. Again, costing less for artifact spells. Baleful Strix is a really powerful card. So for a blue and a black, you get an artifact creature which has got flying and death touch. It's a 1/1, and when it enters the battlefield you can draw a card. Great early game, and saying again, if you need card draw, it's great, and a blocker, it's great to bring back from the graveyard later on in the game. Again, combos are great in this deck. Trinket Mage enters the battlefield. You may search your library for an artifact card with converted mana cost 1 or less. Reveal that card and put it into your hand. So again, finding more artifacts, cheap ones to be able to play really quickly, to be able to boost up your army quicker. Great. Etched Oracle. Another artifact, so for 4, it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter for each colour of mana spent on it. You can pay 1 to remove the 4 counters, and target player draws 3 cards. So if you need some card draw, great, or it's a 4/4 body, assuming you've got 4 colours of mana, which you should do in this deck with your commander. Sanctum Gargoyle, so for 3 and a white you get a 2/3 artifact gargoyle with flying. When it enters the battlefield, you may return an artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. So this is great. You could return this to the battlefield and then return another one. So again, lots of combos in this deck. Really do like that. Got yourself an artifact for mana. Again, this is Skullclamp is a fantastic card in this pack, just because you can then sacrifice it onto a creature to get rid of a creature to draw 2 cards, and then if it's a certain creature, you can then combo it back with bringing something else back. Great, love it. Soul Ring, standard commander staple for mana. Dispeller's Capsule, an artifact that you can have on the board that's cheap to buff up the rest of your creatures, and a sacrifice outlet to destroy an artifact or enchantment. Again, that's just a non-black creature, but another sacrifice outlet. Cranial Plating is quite nice. So for 2, you get to equip an artifact creature with +1/+0 for each artifact you control, so you could get something really, really big. You can then pay 2 black to attach Cranial Plating to another creature you control. So if someone's managed to block up a creature with this on, you can then, or another creature you don't want to die, you could swap it over if you need to throw off combat math. Really nice. Standard mana. These 2 Wellspring cards here are the ones which I think are great for this deck for combos. So you've got enter the battlefield effects on both of them, and when they go into the graveyard, either be sacrificed, you've got a combo there as well. So you could just keep bringing them back and sacrificing them. Great, really, really worth it there. Swiftfoot Boots, standard commander card there. Thopter Foundry, so you can sacrifice a non-token artifact, so those Wellsprings would be a fantastic option to create a 1/1 blue Thopter artifact with flying and gain a life. So if you need more bodies or more sacrifice outlets, you've got that, and there are plenty of cards to bring them back. Commander Spheres for more mana, and you can sacrifice it to draw a card. Loxton Warhammer is just a great piece of art, great equipment. Sorry. Grip of Phrasis, I do like this card. It didn't make my top 10 for cube if I was going to get anything from these decks, but for 2 and a blue you can gain control of target equipment and then equip it to a creature that's 0/0. Great if you've got an opponent that's got some really nice piece of equipment, you can just steal it. Again, that means then you'll have another piece of another artifact to boost up the rest of your creatures. Really nice in this deck. A new card here, so drawing cards equal to the number of cards in your hand, discard card for each card drawn that way, and basic land cycling. I do like having that in Commander, especially with 4 colours. If you end up being mana screwed, this is a perfect way to get one of the lands you need. Next we got one of the, sorry about this, split cards, so Trial and Error. Return all creatures blocking or blocked by target creature to their owner's hand, which is great if you need to get through with someone, especially Silas Renn there, or you can counter a target multicolored spell. This is really nice because it means that because you're an artifact deck, you're going to deal 2 damage to each other creature, so your creatures will stay unharmed. Nice little board wipe early on in the game if needed. Destroying a target creature, you can draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of counters on that creature. There are ways of getting +1/+1 counters on a variety of creatures, or it's another way of sacrificing to get more out of it. It's great value. Creating 4 1/1 birds, again, chump blockers or basic land cycling is great. I mean, there are ways of sacrificing creatures to do stuff, so these could be that. This card's pretty cool. I do like him. So whenever he enters the battlefield or attacks, you may attach any number of equipment to it. So he could turn from being a 3-cost 2/2 to a beast, depending on how many pieces of equipment you have in your deck. Plus, there's another artifact. Magus of the Will. This didn't quite make it into my top 10 cards for cube, but I really do like this. The ability of having a 3/3 body for 3 is great, especially in a limited environment that would be cube. But being able to pay 2 and a black to exile him and play as many cards from your graveyard as you'd like is fantastic, especially with the number of cards in the graveyard with enter the battlefield effects as well. Bring back those sacrifice outlets. Great card in this deck. Fairy Artisans did make it into my list. I really do like this card. So for 3 and a blue, you get a flying 2/2, and whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your opponent's control, create a token that's a copy of this. and means you get their end to the battlefield triggers as well, so your opponents are going to be less likely to create creatures around you. Yes, they can play around it by playing a big creature first and then a little one, because you can only have one of the tokens out at a time, but worst case scenario, it's still another sacrifice outlet for you. Curse of Vengeance, this is a fairly funny card, especially in the multiplayer game, where you can pay 1 black. Whenever enchanted player casts a spell, put a spike counter on it. When it loses the game, you gain X life, draw X cards, where X is the number of spike counters on it. Fairly funny to put early on in the game. Might become a value later on if that player dies before you do. It's just politics and everything of Commander. It's a funny card there. Coastal Breach is one of the Undaunted cards from the set. I think each deck's got one or more. So the cost of it is less depending on how many opponents you've got, and it's just return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. This is great if you're a little bit behind and you just want to either get more ETB triggers on your turn, or the opponents are way ahead of you and you need to level up the board. Sydri, Galvanic Genius, is a pretty cool card here. So for a white, a blue and a black, you get a 2/2. Pay a blue, target non-artifact, so non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its mana cost. If you need to swing in late on in the game, this is great. Or for a white and a black, target artifact creature gains Death Touch and Lifelink until the end of the turn. So if you need to kill something off with your cheap creature, which you don't mind being killed, you've got a way of dealing with one of their bigger creatures and gaining life in the process. One of the mythics here, so Aetherswarm Adjudicator. Sorry, I didn't say that properly. So for 4 and a blue, you get a flying 4/4. You can pay 1, a white and a black to untap it to destroy target creature or enchantment, which is really strong. Oh, and you can pay 2 and a blue to untap him, so potentially in one turn later on, if you've got lots of mana, you can destroy a couple of creatures quite quickly with it. Or you can destroy a creature at the beginning of your turn, swing in for damage, and potentially do something later on if you've got enough mana. Do like that. Another mythic here is Soul of New Phyrexia. So for 6, you get a 6/6 with Trample, which is great. For 5, permanents you control gain Indestructible to the end of turn. Again, a way of protecting all of your artifacts or anything you have. And for 5, you can exile him from your graveyard, and then permanents you gain Indestructible as well. So not only is he useful on the board, but he also has some use in the graveyard as well. Great card there. Hellkite Tyrant, again another one of the mythics. So for 4 and 2 red, we've got a 6/5 flying trample dragon. So whenever it deals combat damage to a player, gain control of all the artifacts that player controls. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 20 or more artifacts, you win the game. This is great. If your opponent's playing with lots of artifacts, or it's just a few you might need, you can throw him down, you get any damage done, which you're more likely to do with trample as well. It's just going to make you so much better. Loads of artifacts buff up the rest of your creatures, plus it's sacrifice outlets, worst case scenario, that aren't actually yours. Another mythic we've got here is Sharam the Hegemon. So for 3, a white, a blue and a black, you've got a flying artifact, a legendary artifact creature Sphinx, which is flying. So when it enters the battlefield, you may return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is great. A lot of them just end up doing from the graveyard back to your hand, but getting that ETB trigger on the same turn is great. And he's just perfect then for him being sacrificed, worst case scenario, to then bring him back and then get a 2-for-1. Great. The only Planeswalker here in the Commander 2016 set is Daretti Scrap Servant. He's perfect for this deck. So for 3 and a black, you get a 3 loyalty Planeswalker. So his +2 is discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. Great. If you need to find something, drawing cards is always good. -2 is sacrifice an artifact. If you do, return target artifact from your graveyard to the battlefield. So with the previous card, you could end up sacrificing that and then bringing a different card back in from the graveyard, or you could bring itself back from the graveyard and then another card to get a couple of ETB triggers, which is great. And his -10 is you get an emblem, but whenever an artifact is put in the graveyard from the battlefield, return that card to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. That is absolutely fantastic in this deck. The amount of ways you can just sacrifice something and bring it back at the end of your turn just means you're going to be able to overpower your opponents with loads of combos. Really, really do like this in this deck. Next we've got Chief Engineer for so 1 and a blue. You've got a 1/3 where artifact spells you cast have got Convoke. This is great if you've got loads of little creatures. You can just tap to make bigger ones cheaper. Fantastic. Means worst case scenario you can bring something back from the graveyard to your hand, tap a couple of creatures to be able to play it. More combos, everyone's happy. Slobad, Goblin Tinkerer. So for 1 and a red, you've got a 1/2. So sacrifice an artifact. Target artifact gains indestructible to the end of turn. This is great if your opponent's attacking something, or you can just shove Silas Renn in for attack. It just means he's going to be indestructible if they try and chump block, and you end up killing someone for it as well. Again, like I said before, loads of combos with sacrificing. Great card in this deck. This one's also really nice. So Shimmer Myr is 3 costs, 2/2 with flash, and then you've got you may cast artifact spells as though they had flash. Fantastic card in this deck. I mean, the more things you can do with the artifacts, which is heavily around, everyone's happy. Master of Etherium, 2 and a blue. His power and toughness is equal to the number of artifacts you control, and other artifacts you control get +1/+1, so it's a nice little anthem. Later on in the game he'll be huge. If you can use that dragon as well to steal opponents' artifacts, he's going to be even bigger, so nice little bomb you've got there. Hanna, the ship's Navigator, is a really nice card in this deck as well. So for 1, a white and a blue, you get a 1/2, which you can pay 1 a white and blue and tapper to return target artifact or enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. More than likely it's going to be an artifact, and again it's just another way of getting things from the graveyard back into your hand. This is probably one of the best cards in this deck in terms of sacrifice outlets as well. So for 4 you get a 2/2. When he enters the battlefield you may search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library, and when he dies you may draw a card. So he's great. Early on in the game, if you wanted to sacrifice him or chump block someone, you can have him find yourself a basic land to be able to ramp up for your next turn, and you also get enough to draw a card as well. It's just really nice in this deck. Jorkadine the Prevailer. This is probably one of the very few non-artifacts in this deck. So for 3, a red and a white, you've got a legendary creature that's a 5/4 with first strike with Metalcraft. So creatures you control get +3/+0 as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. To be perfectly honest, you're going to get that more often than not anyway with this deck. So you're just meaning all of your creatures are bigger. It means your opponent's going to be less likely to throw it in at you because their creatures are more likely going to get killed. Great card and very good for offensive. Sphinx Summoner, so 3 a blue and a black for a flying 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact creature card, reveal it and put it into your hand. If you do, shuffle your library. Again, great to find something later on in the game if you need it, or early on if you need to find yourself a little sacrifice outlet like that Solemn Simulacrum, so great card there. Godo, Bandit Warlord. So for 5 and a red, you get a legendary Barbarian. There's a 3/3. When he enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an equipment card, put it onto the battlefield, and if you do, shuffle your library. So again, it might buff up another lot of creatures. Whenever he attacks for the first time each turn, untap it and all samurai you control. After that phase, there is an additional phase of combat, which is really nice. You could end up with flashing other creatures in to mean that your combat the first time, if you got a few killed, you can bring some of them back. Really solid card there. Myr Battlesphere is a really, really nice card as well. For 7, you get a 4/7. So when it enters the battlefield, create 4 1/1 colourless Myr artifact creature tokens. Possible sacrifice outlets for the commander. You never know. Whenever the Battlesphere attacks, you may tap X untapped Myr you control. If you do, the Myr Battlesphere gets +X/+0 until the end of turn and deals X damage to the defending player. This is great. It just means you can tap a couple of creatures to do some damage to your opponent before you end up throwing in with a potential 8/7. Really nice card there, and there's a lot of other Myrs in the deck as well, so you could end up making it bigger. Hellkite Igniter, so we got another dragon here. So 5 and 2 red, you got a 5/5 flying and haste. 1 and a red, which you can pay multiple times. You get +X/+0 until the end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts you control. You can make this huge. You can make this a massive creature on the turn it comes in, which your opponent's not expecting, and deal loads of damage to them. Really like that. Filigree Angel. Again, this is a really nice enter the battlefield effect there, which you could then sacrifice and do it again if need be later on in the game to really put your life total out of reach. So for 5 and 2 white and a blue, flying 4/4, and when it enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life for each artifact you control. That's going to be a huge life swing for you. Really like that card. Bone Horde, so we're into the equipment now. So for 4, you get a living weapon. So again, it just comes in as a creature. Equipped creature gets +X/+X, where X is the number of creature cards in all graveyards. Again, later on in the game, this could be massive. Plus, you can equip it to someone as well if need be to give them a huge boost. Really nice card there. Typical Commander board wipe. Again, I just like this. You can bring it back later on as well if you want with the bringing back artifacts. Trading Post is a fantastic card in this set because it's just so in this deck because it's so versatile. So for 4, you get an artifact where you can pay 1 to discard a card and gain 4 life. Fairly useful, but not necessarily always going to happen. But it just means you're going to put something into the graveyard, which you can bring back later. So 1, you can tap it and pay 1 life, create a 0/1 white goat creature token, again a sacrifice outlet. For 1 and tapping it, sacrifice a creature, which could be that goat, return target artifact from your graveyard to your hand. Again, another way of getting your artifacts back. And for 1 and tapping it, sacrifice an artifact to draw a card. So lots of ways of sacrificing the creatures, that your artifacts or creatures, to get other things back from your graveyard, which then provides more triggers and combos. Really like this deck. I didn't think much of it to start off with, but having a look through it more detail, I think it's going to be really fun to play. Blinkmoth Urn, beginning of each player's pre-combat main phase. If it's untapped, that player adds mana to his or her mana pool for each artifact she controls. This could be really good on your combat because you're going to have loads of artifacts, so it just means you might be able to pull off more shenanigans than your opponent realises. Read the Runes, pay X to draw X cards. Or you can keep those. You can discard a card unless you sacrifice permanents. I don't mind sacrificing creatures in this deck, so you can end up having more cards and keeping them in your hand. Trash for Treasure, another good way of sacrificing. So as an additional cost, sacrifice an artifact. If you've got plenty of that, you're going to get bonuses from doing that as well, depending on the artifact you're going to sacrifice. Return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's really strong. It means you can end up getting a 2-for-1 trigger. Really like that. Beacon of Unrest, so for 3 and 2 black, you can put a target artifact or creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, then shuffle this back into your owner's library. It could happen. You could end up having this more than once in a game. It could be your own artifacts, which can end up putting loads of triggers, or if there's an artifact your opponent controls that's in their graveyard, you could end up stealing that and helping your artifact army or whatever. Really strong card there, like that. Open the Vaults, return all artifact and enchantment cards from all graveyards to the battlefield under their owner's control. To be perfectly honest, I don't think any of the other decks have quite as many of artifacts or enchantments that are going to get a huge swing out of it as we are. This is going to be huge for us. All of those enter the battlefield triggers, all those sacrifice outlets now waiting to be used, and it just means we'll have a massive army for certain cards in the deck to grow even stronger and do loads of damage. Perfect. Phyrexian Rebirth, 4 and 2 white. You get a sorcery where you can destroy all creatures and then create a XS colours horror artifact creature token where X is the number of creatures destroyed this way. Nice board wipe, and it leaves you something huge on the battlefield. As a result from this, great. Absolutely great. Then we're into the land base, so we've got the usual tap manas there. Sorry, no we're not. We've got Grave Upheaval here as well. Another one of the cards I really like. So put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, and it gains haste. Or basic land cycling is quite useful. Your opponents might have a decent card, but to be perfectly honest, there's a lot of cards that you might end up putting in your battlefield with enter the battlefield triggers that go off. You're going to get something great out of it. So really nice card there. There's your basic lands. I seem to put in a different order than the other one. So you've got your 3 colour manas there. Ash Barrens, which again is a really nice card. I do like this as one of your lands to have in a commander deck. I want to be honest, it's going to go in my cube anyway. Tap it for a colourless mana if you're happy with the rest of your mana base, or you can pay 1 to find yourself a mana if you're in a tough situation. Pretty useful. Bounce land there. Buried Ruin, so you can tap it for a colourless mana, or pay 2 and sacrifice it, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. Another way of getting something back. Really good. Command Tower, some more mana there. 3 mana. Indestructible artifact land. Really useful, it just means you've got another artifact on the battlefield. I really like this in this deck. Bounce lands there. Evolving Wilds normal. 3 colour. Bounce lands. Enters it tapped unless there's your pain land there. another artifact land, Terramorphic Expanse. I'm happy this deck didn't have the cards stuck together, which is quite nice. It just seems to be that one beforehand. This deck is where artifacts matter. They want to be sacrificed with Breya's abilities, and with many ways to bring them back, they can just do that all over again. There are many cards in the deck with enter the battlefield effects and leaving the battlefield effects, such as Solemn Simulacrum and both the Wellsprings, which provide the effects in both directions. There are plenty more enter the battlefield effects within the deck and ways to get them back from the graveyard. Plus, it has the only Planeswalker in the entire Commander 2016 set in Daretti. He is fantastic in the set, but also Magus of the Will is fantastic in this deck as well, with his ability to play cards from the graveyard built into the card. Trading Post is another fantastic enabler of sacrificing and bringing cards back from the graveyard. This deck is pretty combo heavy and the synergy looks great. Bruce-Tal is an odd pick in this deck as he feels a little out of place, but overall this is a deck for the player that really likes combos and a potential aggressive style deck. Let me know in the comments section below what you think of this deck. Was this one of the ones you picked up? Links to the deck openings for the other 4 Commander 2016 decks can be found on this page and in the description below. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up as it really helps the channel to grow. There has been a massive increase to subscriber levels, so thank you all so much for joining the channel, and if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button for more Magic the Gathering content. I just want to say a huge thank you to Pendrakes for getting the products to me on release day. The customer service was fantastic when ordering the products, so I could get the videos out for you as soon as possible. For the UK viewers, there is a link to the store in the description below, which has very competitive prices for all trading card products. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.